just so you know. Okay, so the book is sort of here, but I'm hoping that you'll just get from what I'm saying, because it's hard for me to hold the book steady and get a good picture of it. So for Chapter 22, we're looking at the main areas of evidence: the fossil record, homologous structures. What did Darwin contribute to this? So as we talked about the name of his book being The Origin of Species, but that's a question that's sort of left over from that. The concept of descent with modification. So evolution was mentioned in the very end, but what he called evolution throughout that book was descent with modification. So he thought that there was a common ancestor, and sort of gradually descendants had changes over time. So as they descended, they had modifications. And so the idea of natural selection then and artificial selection are also brought up. Natural selection, remember we talked about, is not, it would be incorrect to say that an organism adapts to their environment, correct? Why would that be incorrect?
Because that's Lamarck.
Pardon me?
Because that's Lamarck.
Right, because that's Lamarck, right? And what evolves? Right, populations, not individuals, right? You can't choose. So I used to always, my Lamarck joke was always that I'm going to keep opening plastic things with my teeth, because then maybe my ancestors will develop a little plastic cutting tooth, right? Which would be super handy given everything's covered in plastic. However, that's not possible, right? As much as I would like a plastic cutting tooth, no matter how much I cut open things with my teeth, I'm not going to magically develop plastic cutting tooth for me or my offspring. Sad face. Okay. So what evidence didn't Darwin have that we have now?
Molecular.
Right, molecular evidence. So we can compare the genomes of different species to see the relationships there. Knowing these big names for things like homology, the fossil record, biogeography, embryology, you would be expected to be able to name and explain all of the kinds of evidence that Darwin had and that have come after Darwin. Yeah.
Is embryology included in molecular homology?
It would be part of anatomical. Okay. But it can be considered its own category altogether.
Okay.
So I would probably say my FRQ or the AP's FRQ would be like, name and explain 3 types of evidence, right? So even if you chose 2 out of anatomy, as long as you explained homologous structures and vestigial organs, like those are 2 separate, evidences, but you've got to explain why those are 2 separate evidences, right? So you wouldn't want to say anatomical and then list those 2 underneath it if you're trying to get, so it's all in how you explain it. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so that's 22. Oh, I'm doing good on time. Okay, 23 is the evolution of populations. Now, we really, this was one chapter that you kind of had to pull together on your own. So I'd like to make sure that tomorrow come in with questions from these chapters, because I would expect you to have a quiz tomorrow, so that I'm going to focus on 25, but how about I pull anything from evolution, and then you have a couple, practice questions before the test. Does that sound good? Okay, so in 23, we're talking about really the modern idea of evolution as we have it now, in terms of thinking about populations evolving. So what they call the modern synthesis of evolution, the modern synthesis is taking all the work of Mendel, all that genetic stuff, our current ability to look at DNA, as well as the fossil record, and all that stuff all put together. Okay, and we call evolution still a theory, but remember that in biology, once we call something a theory, we mean like it's for real. It's a fact. Okay? It's not a hypothesis. Once something is a theory, it means like it's a done deal. We have enough evidence to say that this is what's true. Okay, so this is what pulls in the Hardy-Weinberg, right? So in Hardy-Weinberg, we are using Hardy-Weinberg to show whether a population is evolving or not. You need to know the 5, requirements of being a Hardy-Weinberg population and be able to use the equation in any sort of question that's thrown at you. In the review sheets that I gave you from the AP review book, there's some practice problems. So if you do those practice problems tonight, it would make it easier for me to, help you if you get stuck. And there are some practice problems in the end of this chapter.
Practice problems
for Hardy-Weinberg.
Where are they in the
couple of review sheets I gave you yesterday from my AP Bio review book? I gave you like 4 pieces of paper, somewhere on the graphs, and the other 2 were Hardy-Weinberg, and there's practice problems there. And if you want to go over a few practice problems tomorrow, that would be fine. Just let me know where we're stuck. Okay. Then the role of mutations in evolution. Okay, and then we get into the stuff that was in video and that we still haven't really discussed, but I'd like you to really kind of give it a more serious look over tonight and then come ready with questions, which is genetic drift, which includes the bottleneck effect and the founder effect, which is different than gene flow. So if in your head right now you have no idea what I'm talking about, then you want to make sure that you look at page 461 and 462 to be able to explain those differences. Okay, the next bit of this chapter is the polymorphism, phenotypic polymorphism, and genetic polymorphisms. We saw a lot of polymorphisms at the museum. So it might be easy to think of examples from the museum when you're going over this. So a morph is any different forms of some characteristic. And we learned before about sexual dimorphism and polymorphism when we learned about mutations, so that's something to think about. And also this keyword Klein. Do we know what a Klein is? Okay, so these couple of pages of 23, I definitely want you to, were things you did over February break that I'd like you to focus on tonight and come in with questions if you still don't get them. Okay, Klein is about a geographic change. Once you look it over with the picture, it'll make perfect sense. Okay. We went over the different modes of selection, directional, disruptive, and stabilizing, so I think you're pretty good on that now. Oh, here it is. Sexual dimorphism and intrasexual selection is on page 468. Can anybody give me an example of sexual dimorphism from the museum?
The butterflies, how the males have the UV lighting reflective stuff and it attracts the female.
Yes. Yep. All right. And birds are really, really big on sexual dimorphism, right? Because the males are all showy and the females tend to be more plain looking, and the males have to really display themselves and all of that to get a mate. Okay? And being really good at whatever it is that the female is looking for is a big thing in bird world, right? So, like some birds, the males have to like create a nest and then like lead her to it and show her and like do a little dance in front of it and look how pretty it is. And you have to be pretty darn good at having a really nice looking nest to attract a female to it. And so females tend to peruse a bunch of nests and then choose the best one. So that reminds me, I didn't show you the blue-footed booby dance, which is really cute, so I can pull that up today because we've got a little bit of time. Okay, so these are the key things from 23. That's it. Okay, chapter 24 is what we just went over today, the speciation, the biological species concept, defining a species of by organisms that can make viable offspring, viable fertile offspring. So all of the reproductive barriers we went over, none of those that are produced, like even if we make the post-zygotic barriers, we're able to make a zygote or a being. If it's not a robust, fertile organism, it's not really a species.
Dr. Mead?
Yeah.
How do dogs work? Like dogs and cats?
Artificial selection.
So, but how, are they all the same species?
Yes.
Oh.
So
Okay.
all dogs are canine domesticus or something, I forget. But so all dogs, domestic dogs, are the same species. They can all mate and produce viable offspring, even though they look completely different. So they were artificially selected based on traits that were desired. Okay, and the same for the domestic cats.
Yeah, because for some dogs to mate, wouldn't it be practically impossible because of the way their bodies are shaped?
But their gametes would create a zygote, right?
Their gametes
Yeah.
would
Even if
be
one is
As long as they can get in the right position.
Okay, moving on.
Yep, moving on. Yep. And they can, they can do, IVF, in vitro, for dogs as well. No, I mean, yeah, they,
You put two dogs in a room for long enough, they're gonna do
right. I mean,
stop, clap.
the drive to mate for dogs is very, very strong, and I left my phone on. So I'm going to end part 1 so I can turn off my phone. No, by the time I get over there, it'll stop ringing. Sorry, I had it on so we could do the FaceTime. I apologize, video. Okay, so the other definitions of species on page 476 are minor, but there. And we did talk about allopatric and sympatric speciation. Right, allo meaning different, sim meaning same, so you can kind of keep that in mind. The thing we really didn't get to talk to you was about polyploidy and alloploidy, which has to do mostly with plants. So page 478 and 479 is something I'd like you to look over on your own and ask me questions tomorrow if you still have questions about it. When you look over it, it's just really about the number. Remember, we've learned haploid and diploid. Well, now we're talking about polyploid and autoploid. So give that a look, and we'll talk about it tomorrow if there's anything left. This is the rest of 24. Gradualism and punctuated equilibrium on page 482 is very, very simple. Gradualism is the idea of slowly evolving from a common ancestor, as opposed to punctuated equilibrium, which is where there are dramatic changes. This is page 482 if you're losing me. As you can see, this is a pretty substantial unit, which is why there's some stuff we've been able to go over in great detail, and some of it you kind of need to work on a little bit on your own. Okay. Skipping ahead. That's it for 24, really. 25, phylogeny and systematics. This is kind of what the 2 mini labs were about, is looking at the phylogenetic trees and being able to put evidence together. We were using DNA evidence to establish phylogenetic trees and compare DNA. So we were looking at molecular homologies. There's a distinction that they try to make to just help you to understand the difference between using a tree to map out classification versus phylogeny, which is about ancestry, right? So sometimes we show you, like on page 497, figure 25.9, they show you how we might use a branching to show you the different species, but that's not what we're talking about with evolution. Phylogenetic trees, we're talking about making diagrams to show the ancestral relationships specifically. So on page 498 and 499 is some of the terms that came up during the labs, the difference between a cladogram and a phylogram. So the cladogram is about characteristics, and the phylogram is about evolutionary relationships. 498 and 499. It's got to be the quickest little review video I ever put together.
The phylogram is what?
Phylogram is the evolutionary relationships thing, and the cladogram is actual morphology. So you have a vertebrae, you have 4 limbs, etc. Okay. Skipping ahead. Wait, this is what we did our whole lab on. Kind of going with the lab instead of this stuff. Skipping. Okay. 26. I would like to just show you a bit of a video tomorrow to explain the beginnings of the earth and life, because the video explains it better than I can, and we'll just watch a bit of it and then you'll be like, oh, duh, that's how, life was and it began. But the main point of chapter 26, this is why I didn't have you read it, is to just understand that obviously the earth is 4.5 billion years ago, but when was the first bacterial life on the planet?
4
billion? No?
3.2 billion?
Just throwing it all around.
Yes,
this is going back to the difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. So write yourself a note to find out when prokaryotic life began on the planet. I don't want to tell you, because if I just tell you, this number is obviously not sticking in your head. So imagine that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old approximately, and when did life begin? So we did not have an oxygen-rich atmosphere to start, and the first life did not require oxygen. So but the video will help you with that tomorrow. So I'm going to end this video right now unless anybody has a question that they want to go on the video. Nay.